Hello there, everyone. Art Burns here, wishing you well today. So I'm enunciating myself a little bit better and trying to project my voice a little more because I got a couple of messages from two different people last week saying that they couldn't hear these videos so well. They couldn't hear the audio. So please let me know if you're having that problem. Okay, I want to know how widespread this problem is. If it's something on my end, or perhaps it's something with YouTube on just a couple of videos, or what's going on. It would help me to know if other people are hearing this or not hearing this and having a problem hearing me, so that I know how to approach the solution to the problem. Okay, so if you're having any trouble hearing my videos, if you feel like you have to turn the volume way up to hear what I'm saying, then let me know. Okay, and certainly if that has changed over the course of the last couple of weeks or whatever. Okay, but as I said, I'm going to try to enunciate myself a little bit more and project my voice a little bit more. So hopefully it's not a problem, but please let me know if it is. Okay, send me a message in YouTube or email me at art@artburnscoaching.com. Okay. So, thank you for being here today. I'm really excited to be here with you. So I wanted to kind of work off of what we talked last week on Friday about, which was implicit biases. And specifically, we were talking about the negativity bias, right? The negativity bias is just the way that our brain filters out those experiences that we have, the things that we see, the things that we understand, the things that we just kind of experience throughout our day. Our brains are going to filter out the negative aspects of our experiences to show us those a little bit more, right? We're going to pay more attention to the negative aspects of our experiences, right? Because this is going to keep us alive, right? At least that's how it's worked for, the evolution of mankind, right? And womankind, the humanity, right? And so, of course, the negativity bias, I don't know if it's of course or not of course, to let you know, the negativity bias is just one of many, many different implicit biases that we have, right? So the same way that the negativity bias is going to show you, kind of make you pay attention to the things that are negative in your life. I'll give you just one example. The confirmation bias is another bias that allows you, that kind of makes you pay attention more to the information that you see in your life that confirms what you already believe, right? And it filters out that information that kind of disproves what you believe, evidence to the other side, right? You're only going to see the stuff that makes you, that confirms what you believe. You're not going to see so much the stuff that makes you, kind of shows that you're wrong, right? And so these are just a couple of many, many different implicit biases, and you can do a quick Google search and find, a whole, series of lists of these different implicit biases. And the fact of the matter is that there's so much that happens, right, implicitly. There's not only implicit biases, but there's also implicit memories, right? Human beings, we act in patterns, right? And part of the reason why we do this is because there is so much information that we process every single day, right? And we don't even realize it, right? Like, there's just so many things that happen every single day. Like I think I said this the other day. So I'm talking to you here, and I'm looking at the screen here. In the peripheral of my eyesight, I'm seeing like the carpet over there, and I'm seeing, a couple of objects in the corner over there in my office. My brain is still processing that information, right? And so it's like billions of points of data every single day that your brain winds up processing, right? So the idea is that, the more automated your brain can make things, right? The more pattern oriented your brain can be, the easier it's going to be for you to function in your life, because you cannot possibly consciously process all the data that comes in through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, through your mouth, through your sense of touch. You just can't do it. If we did that, we would be completely paralyzed. It would not be at all possible for us to even function, right? Because it's just too much information, right? And so part of the way that our minds and brains kind of, make this happen is through patterns, right? And so this is why we get into routines, right? And so, like, when you get up in the morning, you, generally speaking, most of us get up in the morning, we do a very specific kind of certain things that we do, right? So, like, we tend to get out of the same side of the bed, right? We tend to, go to the washroom, then we might check our phone, what have you. But even beyond that, those actions, we're also kind of thinking, right? and we're kind of we're thinking the same kind of patterns of thoughts, right? So you check in like, okay, what time is it, what do I have to do today, what's going on in my life, and this kind of stuff, right? And there's nothing wrong with doing this, right? It's not just like the negativity bias, it's not necessarily wrong or bad, right? But it's a pattern, right? And the more awareness we can bring to these patterns, right, the more we're going to be able to live a conscious life, right? And as we live in consciousness, right, whether it's as a parent, as an individual, as a husband or a wife or a child of someone else or a friend or what have you, as we live in consciousness, it allows us to show up to our lives, right, in a very, very, a more, full and engaged way, right? And of course, showing up to your life in a full and engaged way means that you're going to live your life in a certain level of happiness and a certain level of, again, mental, physical, and emotional well-being, right? Now, again, these patterns and the biases and memories that kind of propel these patterns, it's all implicit, right? It's all unconscious. It's all in the background, right? We don't know what's going on unless we're paying attention to it, right? And so that's what we talked about last week on Friday, is the act of the active practice of gratitude, right? Sitting down for 5 minutes a day, even a few times a day if you can. Once a day is fine, but sitting down for a few minutes every day and just noticing, okay, what's happening in my life right now, and today, right now, what's happening that is really good, right? And just writing those things down. What you're doing now is you're bringing the conscious awareness to those things in your life that are positive, and you're going to, again, you're going to first of all doing that brings the negativity bias from implicit to explicit, right? You're aware of the fact that you're seeing the negative aspects of your life, and so now you're doing something specifically and intentionally to alter that, right? So that's the benefit of doing that gratitude practice, right? And of course, we can bring awareness to our lives through practice also, right? Like I said, and that's what I talk about here, right? As we talk about mindfulness, we talk about moment to moment non-judging awareness, meaning just being aware of what is happening as it's happening, right? As the events of our lives and the experiences of our lives unfold in real time, to be present with them, to be paying attention to them, right? Without judgment, right? Without saying like, oh, this is a bad experience, this is a good experience, just noticing everything as just an experience, right? This is a way in which we can bring a lot of this implicit activity into the explicit. Pardon me. And then we can, once we do that, we help to create a more balanced and more, sort of embodied approach to our whole lives, right? Or an engaged, embodied approach, right? Because we're feeling things in our body, and we're paying attention to our body. We're feeling, instead of just living in our heads, we're kind of going through life as a whole organism, right? But another really important aspect to the implicit biases and the implicit memories and the implicit actions that happen to us all the time is how we relate to each other personally, right? As I talked about last week, our thoughts create the world around us. So when somebody, approaches you to talk to you, right? Whether it's, say you're dealing with your child, right? Or last week I mentioned like an employee kind of situation, right? Like say you're a manager and you have to talk to an employee who's been underperforming, or you're an underperforming employee who's been called into your manager's office, right? In any of these cases, if you're the employee and your implicit bias about your manager is that the person is mean, they're unempathic, they don't care about you, they're maybe prone to anger or what have you, right? Those thoughts that you have when you go into that meeting, that's what you're going to see, right? That's what you're going to see from this person, whether it's true or not, right? That's the point, right? These are just thoughts that you might be having. And as you're having these thoughts, you're going to see that out of the person, right? So in other words, pardon me again, unless unless the manager is somehow like coming like handing you flowers and just really deliberately making a point that they are not mean, they are not angry, they are not ignorant to your your problems or whatever, that they feel empathy to you, right? Unless they're making a deliberate effort to show you those things, then what you're going to see is what you're thinking you're going to see, right? And of course, nobody, managers are not going to hand you flowers and go out of their way because they don't know what you're thinking, right? And that's the thing, right? We don't know what each other's thinking, right? So one of the greatest ways to neutralize this kind of implicit activity of the mind, right, is to practice compassion for other people, right? When we practice compassion, right? Compassion comes from the Latin phrase compare, right? I used to say compassus, but I realized the other night, thinking about my implicit memories of Latin in school, compassus would be a noun, right? So it's compare, which it means to suffer with, right? That's what compare means, to suffer with, right? And so when we practice compassion for others, right, what we're doing is we're acknowledging that everybody on some level or other, in some way, form, goes through difficult times, right? And that we have an intention to do what we can to wish for and take active intentional action to reduce that person's suffering. Okay, it's a very, very simple thing, but it's very, very profound at the same time. Okay, because the truth of it is, right, when we walk into that manager's office, right, or this happens with parents all the time too. As you know, I work a lot with parents, but I also work with non-parents. But when I talk to parents a lot, the sensation is, and this has happened in my own parenting too, the sensation is that that when your 5-year-old child is like, you walk into a room and they have a blue crayon in their hand and they've just drawn all over the wall, and they turn around and say, I didn't do it, that kind of thing. We tend to feel like our child has done something to us, right? Like this child is doing something just to hurt me, right? Now, of course, it's easy to slip into that as parents, right? But it's also easy to understand as parents, like, okay, that's not really true, right? My child did not do this deliberately just to hurt me, right? But when it comes to adults, right, adult to adult interactions, right, it's very, very much the case where we implicitly, automatically, subconsciously feel as though people are doing things to us. But in reality, they are not doing things to us. They are doing things for themselves. And they are doing things that they believe will reduce their level of suffering and increase their level of happiness. Okay, here's a great example, right? When you're driving down the road in your car, everything's going great. You're singing along to a tune on the radio, and everything's fine, and you're feeling great, and maybe you've got kids in the back, and you're all laughing and having a good time, right? And all of a sudden, somebody cuts you off, right? Now you hit the brakes and you say, "Oh my gosh, you almost killed us!" Like you almost killed us. You have an active verb, right, which you did something to me, right? And the sense at that point, the understanding, the implicit understanding is that out of all these cars out here, right, you came and picked me with my vulnerable family in the car, or not, and you cut me off and put me in danger, right? So you did this to me, right? Now, of course, when we feel that, right, something really important happens in our mind, right? We go into our survival, right? It's fight or flight, right? It's like, you have just done this to me. Now I need to, defend myself against you, right? Now, of course, defense is a broad term, right? Like, obviously there's nothing really to defend, right? The best defense would be just to slow down a little bit, let them go, be safe and all that, right? But a lot of times, what do, right? We honk the horn, or we maybe make a hand gesture that is less than, loving kindness directed towards this person, right? Maybe even some people like me who way back in my, 10 years ago, whatever, I would have, revved up and like followed the person and like really cut them off, right? Like that would have been my thing. It's like I gotta now cut this person off to let them know that they can't mess with me. And that's the way our brains get into this sort of this sort of this sort of perspective based on the fight or flight, right? But the reality is that this person didn't do this to me, right? They just swerved in front of me, right? I mean, this is 99.9% of the time. Of course, there's some people out there who are just, sociopathic and do mean things just for the sake of doing mean things. But those are the very, very, very slim minority of humanity, right? Like you're talking about 0.0000001% of the overall population, right? So, and the chances of you ever meeting a person like that is almost nil, right? So generally speaking, anytime someone is cutting you off like that, or bumping your cart in the grocery store, or cutting in front of you in a line, or doing anything that bothers you, right? Anytime you feel like somebody has done something that hurts you or bothers you, right? The reality is, let's get back to the example of somebody cutting you off in the car. There are so many reasons that this person might have cut me off, right? Maybe they just found out somebody's been hurt, and so they're rushing to get to the hospital, right? Maybe they have to go to the bathroom really bad. Maybe they're almost out of gas, and they're worried about not getting to the next exit so that they can get gas, right? Maybe they're angry about something. Maybe they just got a phone call that they just lost their job or something like that, and they're just blind with rage, right? Not to say that any of these are reasonable or excusable reasons to cut me off and endanger me. They're not. But the motivation had nothing to do with me, right? It had everything to do with the pain and the suffering that this person was feeling, right? And so when we practice compassion, what we start to do is we start to pay attention to that aspect, right? We start to pay attention to the fact that, every other person out there is just like me, right? They're a person in the world who deals with problems, who deals with challenges, who deals with up times and bad times. They deal with struggles and pain and suffering. And they are always going to act in a way that relieves their pain and suffering. They are always going to do things that move them to a place of happiness. And that's all that anybody wants, right? And now again, this even includes people who steal from others, right? They're stealing from someone because they believe that this is what they need to do to make themselves happy, right? They need to get $1 million, so they need to pilfer it from people, right? And if that's the case, like Bernie Madoff, like he believed that he had to do this for his own benefit. Again, not that he's right, not that it's excusable, not that it's okay that he did this, right? Not that we have to ever agree that he did this. But when we understand that he didn't just drain my bank account because he didn't like me, he did it because he thought that he was doing something that he needed to do for his own happiness. Obviously, this is an extreme example, right? The cutting off in the car is much more realistic for most of us, right? And of course, the more, the more drastic the action and the sort of the insult or the damage, the pain that's caused to us by the other person, the harder it is to understand this and to see the fact that no, this person is suffering and they're trying to relieve their suffering, so I should feel compassion for them, right? I should wish for their well-being. I should wish for them to be relieved of their suffering. It's harder to do the more drastic and dramatic and harmful the actions of another person are, but it's not impossible. And with practice, it becomes more and more attainable. And when it becomes more and more attainable, and the way we do this is start out with the little things, right? Start out with the person who cuts you off. Start out with the person who cuts in line at Starbucks. Start out with the person who grabs the last roll of toilet paper off the shelf, right? Like like, oh no, you just took that from me. They didn't. What they did was they took that because they thought they needed it, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with asserting yourself. There's nothing wrong with asking, hey, do you really need that? You also have 3 other rolls of toilet paper in your basket. I need a roll of toilet paper. Would it be all right if I took one of those? Nothing wrong with any of that, right? But the person says, no, I need it, then understand that they're doing that to relieve their own suffering, right? And when we do this, right, when we acknowledge the fact that everybody is out to just make themselves more happy, then what we do is we maintain a positive and healthy balance in ourselves, right? We don't become stressed by other people's actions. We don't become triggered by other people's actions. And this allows us, yeah, sure, we might lose out on that piece of toilet paper. We might, we're always going to have people cut us off on the road. We're always going to have people do things that bother us, right? And the question is how we react to that. Right? And so what I'm offering you now is the way to not react in a way that is more harmful to yourself, but instead keeps yourself on an even, balanced, and sort of a good place in your life, right? So in other words, when that person cuts you off, right? Again, 10 years ago, right? If somebody cut me off on the road, it would extend to maybe a half hour of me being just, maybe even more than that, but me being angry and resentful and oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? And that's a half hour of my life, or much more sometimes. Those are moments of my life that I'm just giving up, right? And what happens if I have my kids in the back seat of the car and I'm living with this anger? Guess what? I'm not showing up for those kids. I'm not present with them at that moment. Right? And so this is the key, right? When I can say, oh man, that person must be suffering right now. They must be in some true pain. And I hope they feel better. Hey kids, everything all right? You all cool? You want to get ice cream? Let's go get ice cream. Let's be together. Let's sing a song. Let's do something together. See, so it's not for the other person. It's for me and for my children and for the people in my life who I care for. That's why we practice compassion, because we don't want to engage in this anger and this resentment that other people might inspire in us through their actions, but their actions having been just to serve themselves in their own happiness and their relief of their own suffering. So if you'd like to learn about some of these practices, okay, they're super simple, ways that you can do this for just a few minutes a day. Right? Seriously, just a few minutes a day. So if you'd like to learn about any of these, hit me up. Okay, send me a direct message, reply to this email, leave a comment on this video, or send me an email at art@artburnscoaching.com, or go to my website and there's ways to get in touch with me on there. You can actually book a call, you can get my email address, whatever it is, but get in touch with me. Let's talk about this, okay? Because just a few minutes a day, you could turn this whole thing around. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you later. And maybe tomorrow we're going to talk about forgiveness, which kind of arises from compassion. All right, everybody. Have a good day. I wish you well. Thanks again. Bye-bye.